Swedenborg talks about different levels of internal meaning to the word. You've got the literal sense, of course, and you've got this sense about regeneration, you've got the sense about the church history, and you've kind of got this whole spiritual world history going on as well, or the Lord's history. And I know that I tend to focus mostly on the regenerative sense. I feel like that's usually the most relevant and pertinent one to our lives. But today we're going to hop off that track and spend some time on this middle layer, the kind of the church history track. So you can leave this service not feeling convicted, right? You can leave this service not feeling like, oh, I got told what to do better this week, right? This is just a sit there and take it in, and you can feel like, all right, maybe I learned something today. And as I said in the weekly update, this is about a lead up into New Church Day next week. And New Church Day typically is all about the book of Revelation. We typically pick, Woman Clothed with the Sun or New Jerusalem. But there's lots of other stuff in the book of Revelation. And in particular today, I wanted to actually jump out of the book of Revelation into the Gospel of Matthew. Gospel of...
Are you not wearing your mic?
Sorry, I can see that it's... So Gospel of Matthew, because there's this interaction between Jesus and the disciples where they're walking away from the temple, and the disciples basically want to know more. What's going on? How do we know when the end of the world is coming? And so we don't have time to go through the entire Gospel of Matthew chapter 24, but we'll get through about half of it. So what we're just going to do is, read a chunk and then discuss it, and read a chunk, go back and forth, and work our way through this over the next, 18 to 20 minutes. So with that as a lead-in, let's start with the first 14 verses of Matthew 24. Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to its buildings. "Do you see all these things?" he asked. "Truly I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. "Tell us," they said, "when will this happen? What will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Jesus answered, "Watch out that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, claiming, 'I am the Messiah,' and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed." I think it's a big phrase right there. See to it that you're not alarmed. Have you heard wars and rumors of wars? Yeah. See to it that you're not alarmed. Whew. Such things must happen. It's got to happen. But the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All of these are the beginnings of birth pains. Then you'll be handed over and to be persecuted and put to death, and you'll be hated by all nations because of me. Better remember that line about not being alarmed, right? At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other, and many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Okay, so we got a fair bit to unpack there, right? When I read this, I read it as basically, but see to it that you're not alarmed. And I put that after every sentence. You're going to be persecuted and put to death, but see to it that you're not alarmed, right? False prophets are going to deceive many people, but see to it that you're not alarmed. And so that to me is kind of hovers over the whole chapter. All these terrible things are going to happen, but see to it that you're not alarmed. And I feel like that is a balm for my soul as I see things that, mirror some of this stuff in the world today. And I go, all right, see to it that I'm not alarmed, right? See to it that I'm not alarmed. These things must happen, right? Who's in charge? It's not me. He's in charge, right? Relax. But as we start looking at some of the symbolism here, we got the big one is the temple, right? He says, truly I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down. All right, so they're leaving the temple, and he's saying it's going to be destroyed. And this becomes a bit of a deal, right, with the Pharisees later on. They say, he says he's going to rebuild the temple in 3 days. What's he talking about? Well, what's that temple made of? This is the temple that was made of stone. Stone is truth. And what does that temple house? Well, it houses at its core the seat of the Lord. The 10 Commandments in the ark is what that temple is holding. So Jesus is predicting that the temple is going to fall, not one stone will remain on the other. And he's talking about the utter destruction of truth at that time. Right? And with it, the chief cornerstone, which is the belief in the presence of the Lord. Right? So when you deny God's presence and you deny all of his truth, right? That's a complete denial and leads to the utter destruction of humanity. Right? The entire temple is going to go by. That's the truths, I think of it like this, the teachings that protect the 10 Commandments just taken away. All the supporting stuff just taken away. So Jesus says that's all going to be gone. And when we deny God's presence and we deny his teachings, well, guess what? It's the ruin of humanity because, well, people are going to betray one another, just like he says. Without the guidance of divine truth, lawlessness will abound, right? People will do whatever they want. And without the presence of divine love, right, the love of many will grow cold, right? Those are the main things he's pointing out there in verses 9 through 12. So all these things, you take away the temple, you take away the truth, boom, all this stuff is going to happen. And he says, well, hey, there's still going to be hope because if you endure to the end, you will be saved, right? So that's part one. The next verse we look at here is the abomination of desolation. Verse 15, when therefore you shall see the abomination of desolation declared by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place. And it goes on. What is the abomination of desolation? Ooh, this is a good one. Because it appears a few times in Scripture. And Daniel's the one who coins the phrase, but it sounds so terrible, doesn't it? Abomination of desolation. Now, a lot of people, well, we get a hint of it because a lot of people point to what happens around that time where the king of Syria comes in, he conquers them, and in their plundering of the temple, they take out all the Jewish stuff and they put instead there a statue of Zeus. So Zeus gets set up in the temple, right? So no more sacrifices, no more table of showbread, no more altar, all that stuff, gone. Instead, we've got the pagan god Zeus. And this is what many point to as the abomination of desolation. Swedenborg says, well, that's not quite right. That's not what the Lord's referring to. But boy, it makes a good point because Swedenborg's telling us the abomination of desolation is when there is no truth, right? The churches of the day, they're not teaching what is correct. It's a desolate place. When we have a desolate spiritual framework, what happens? We put in our own abominable ideas. So while Swedenborg doesn't say this whole Zeus swapping in is actually the abomination of desolation, it's a great picture of it. Because what happens, we get rid of the Lord. What do? We basically set up ourselves as God. We set up stones and altars and things like that we made. It's desolate because we don't have the temple, right? The temple's been destroyed. All the truth is gone. And so we have a real problem on our hands. We have a real problem on our hands. We live by our own rules, our own laws. And here's the thing, you can even be good at obeying civil laws, but at the same time, because it's a desolate place for spirituality, even when we're nice to other people, it's because we're doing it out of our own sense of feeling like a god. And that's what's going on here. This abomination of desolations. We've set ourselves up as God, and therefore the writings say we've tainted all of our works with that, and therefore it's not very good. So, abomination of desolation, it's not Zeus, but yes it is. Right? And this is particularly pointed towards the time of the 1700s when the Trinity is all corrupted. Right? We see God as angry. We just try to set ourselves up as the gatekeepers to heaven. Oh, you want to go to heaven? You got to come to the priesthood. You've got to pay for your indulgences and pay for your sins and all that kind of stuff. That whole corruption. There's nothing good there. We set ourselves up as the gatekeepers to heaven. So that's a new church way of seeing that. And then it goes to the next section here, fleeing destruction, verses 16 to 20. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the housetop go down to take anything out of the house. Let no one in the field go back to get their cloak. How dreadful will it be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath. Yes, that's not happiness, right? I mean, it's kind of naturally it makes sense if there's earthquakes and wars and all that stuff. Yeah, it's tough to be a pregnant woman on that time, right? Sure, that's difficult. Well, okay, let's see. The order I want to go in this is, all right, pregnant women. Think about the woman clothed with the sun, right? She's bearing forth a child. And I picked that story up because, well, obviously it's New Church Day related, but also when we think about how we teach that story, what is the child? Well, the child is the new church, right? It's these new ideas that are coming forth from the woman clothed with the sun. And the same kind of imagery applies here to understand, well, what's a pregnant woman? Jesus is saying that it's really hard. It's going to be really hard for people who are trying to bring forth new ideas into the world, right? It's the person who's on this regenerative path who wants to do the right thing. How are you going to bear that into life? Because all the world around you is negative. It's this is how you do it, this is how you do it, and none of it's spiritually based. It's all about self-godness. And so therefore, if you're a pregnant woman, bringing forth a new idea into the world is really hard. So it says then, let no one go back to the field to get their cloak. Let's do this in the right order. So Judea, go to the mountains. On your housetop, don't go down. And remember that in old times, the rooftop, the staircase was outside the house. So you don't go back in the house. You just go out. And don't go back to get your cloak. Again, a parallel story to help you understand this one is Sodom and Gomorrah. Right? Lot and his wife flee, and what's the rule? Don't look back. Don't look back. And so these three states of people in Judah, people on the housetop, and people on the fields, these are all stages of spiritual development. He's like, all right, if you're in this Judah state, in this place of loving the Lord, or in the housetop loving the neighbor, or in the field of being obediently trying to follow the Lord, if you're in any of those places and this negativity is coming to you from the outside, flee. Get out of town. Don't go back to lower places. That will be bad for you. Don't go back and never turn back. Just if evil is starting to overwhelm you, run away. Get it? It's going to be tough if you're a pregnant woman, if you're trying to bear something new into the world, if you're trying to become a new person, you're trying to do this whole path of regeneration, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. Pray your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath. Oh yeah, because in the winter, well, guess what? That's no love in the world. No love. Oh, please make sure that's not happening. On the Sabbath, it's about the connection with wanting to learn about the Lord, right? Sabbath's all about divine instruction. So it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. So woe to all of that. This is going to be a difficult process. if we're trying to flee from our old ways, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. So, let's see. Anything else on that series I wanted to know? I think we got that. I guess, oh yeah, here's the summary sentence. It's difficult to grow when we are in hypocritical states of outward piety and self-righteousness. Right? That's the key about the Sabbath, because what Swedenborg says is that here the Sabbath, because the world is so bad, it has an inverted meaning where it's setting ourselves up as God, and therefore, boy, if you're trying to travel in your Sabbath, as it were, it's about hypocrisy of saying the good things but actually not doing them. So it's a picture, again, of that world around you is so corrupt that you just can't do the right thing, because no matter what resource you pull on, you're getting answers from self, right? The world is, you go to the church, you're not getting the truth, you're being told, oh, you need to pay money, or you need to do this ritual, or you need to say these things. That's your key. It's not working out for you. And then in our final series here, or section, Matthew 24, verses 21 to 29. He says, "For then there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. If those days had not been cut short, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. At that time, if anyone says to you, 'Look, here's the Messiah,' or 'There he is,' do not believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you ahead of time. So if anyone tells you, 'There he is, out in the wilderness,' do not go out, or 'Here he is in the inner rooms,' do not believe it. For as the lightning that comes from the east is visible even in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever there's a carcass, there the vultures will gather. Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken." Lots of distress there, right? So, again, Jesus is talking about the sadness, the affliction, the pain suffered by people who actually want to do the right thing, but they can't do it because of external forces. Whether it be false teachings of religious leaders or inherited tendencies and evils of all the different kinds. He's saying, there's going to be a widespread infestation of hellish forces everywhere. And it's going to make it really hard to do what's right. That's the situation when Jesus was born. And he's saying that the same thing's going to be at the second coming. These various violent occurrences like earthquakes. Earthquakes, the writings talk about as being a massive shakeup in the state of the church. Something massively is going to happen, and it's going to be violent, and it's going to be uncomfortable. Of course, this can also happen in our own mind, of course, but he's saying in this series, this is about what's real, like what's going to happen in the physical world, that the churches are going to be shaken. We know that Jesus' battle in his physical life was about forces on earth, but in the second coming, it's also going to be about forces in the next life, forces in the spiritual worlds. And so he's saying, I'm fighting against the spiritual world, which is infiltrating down to here, and so you've got to be on your guard. You've got to be on your guard because those forces from the spiritual world infiltrating here are going to say things that just aren't true. He says, all right, beware of the false prophets and Christ. He says the truth won't be found in the desert. All right, what's the desert? Well, this is the desolate state of the religious establishment. You're not going to find it in the churches that you know. He says it's not going to be found in the inner rooms. Well, what are the inner rooms? Well, that's here, right? In your opinion, in your mind. You're not going to find the answer to salvation in your own head. So don't be deceived by false teachers or the world, the desert. Don't be deceived by your own opinions. Rather, trust in the coming of of the Son of Man. So, don't go to the desert. Don't go to the inner rooms. It's really hard because we want to go to these places. We see these as, the religious authorities. They're the experts, right? They're the scholars. They've studied this stuff. They should know. And when you lose faith in them, well, where else do you turn? Well, you know what? I'll just do what I think is right. And we have the whole book of Judges that tells us that's not really going to work out really well, right? Whenever they do what they think is right, it doesn't go well. So, if you have a barren religious teaching and nothing good in your mind to guide you, boy, what a bad place. So there you go, oh, well, there's the wilderness, and then you go, oh, well, guess what? The sun's going to be darkened, right? Because the sun is a symbol for the Lord. His love and his heat, or his love and his wisdom, by the light and the heat, that's going to go away. The moon will not give its light. The moon's a symbol for faith. And I've come to appreciate over the years understanding why the moon is faith. Because the moon is the second light, right? It's a reflection of the sun. And when do we see the moon? Usually when it's dark. So faith is something that gets you through a dark time. And how does it get you through a dark time? By providing you a reflection of the Lord's light. It gives you the Lord's light even when you're in a dark place. Things are going bad. You're not feeling good. What do you need? You need faith. You need hope. You need to believe. So if we go through this whole series that Jesus has been talking about so far, right? We've got the temples destroyed. There's abomination of desolation. Flee. There's evil forces all around you. Get away. Don't turn back. And yeah, it's going to be hard because the sun's going to be darkened. And therefore, the moon's going to be not going to give its light. And stars will fall from the skies. So overall, this is not a pleasant picture. This is a difficult time, right? And we can see, even though that Swedenborg says all this stuff happened a couple hundred years ago, we can see the ripples of this in our world today. We can still see there are places where there's abomination of desolation. We can see how sometimes we have to flee from evil. We can see where personal opinion is being set up as God's instead of what the Lord actually teaches. So it's a rough time. It's a rough time. And as we think about New Church Day, I think the key to remember is what hovers over all of this is do not be alarmed. Do not be alarmed. These things have to happen. Relax. It's okay. It's going to be birthing pains. It's not going to be fun. You're not going to enjoy it. It's not a good time. It's not a party. But don't be alarmed. These things have to happen. Amen. So we have some